Before the sitcoms of today pushed boundaries, one bizarre 1961 show dared to feature chimpanzees as actual cast members. Not pets, but children, and it became one of television's most spectacular failures. From dangerous on-set incidents to nightmare-inducing commercials, the Hathaways hid secrets stranger than its premise. Fact 1. Declared possibly the worst series ever. Most television shows that fail are simply forgotten, fading quietly into obscurity without anyone bothering to remember they ever existed. But the Hathaways earned something far more dubious. It became a cautionary tale of everything that can go wrong in television production. More than 2 decades after the show aired its final episode, television historians Harry Castleman and Walter Podrazik took the time to single out this forgotten sitcom in their 1982 book about television history, bestowing upon it one of the most devastating assessments ever written about a network program. They called The Hathaways possibly the worst series ever to air on network TV, and they didn't stop there. The critics systematically tore apart every element of the production, from the inept scripts to the degrading premise of treating chimpanzees as human children, even going so far as to describe the program as having total worthlessness. What makes this criticism particularly notable is that these weren't just reviewers panning a show they happened to dislike. Castleman and Podrazik were respected television historians documenting the medium's evolution, and they felt compelled to specifically highlight the Hathaways as an example of just how low network television could sink during the early 1960s. The fact that the show competed for this title against countless other failed sitcoms from that era, yet still managed to stand out as potentially the absolute worst, speaks volumes about just how spectacularly misguided the entire concept was from the very beginning. Fact 2. ABC had to sponsor its own show. In the world of television, advertising revenue is the lifeblood that keeps shows on the air, with networks typically having no trouble finding companies eager to pay premium prices to reach millions of viewers during prime time. But the Hathaways faced such abysmal ratings that it created an almost unprecedented situation in broadcasting history. The show's viewership numbers dropped so catastrophically low that ABC found itself unable to secure commercial sponsors willing to buy advertising time during the program, which meant the network faced a difficult choice: either cancel the show immediately or find another way to keep it running. Rather than pulling the plug right away, ABC made the highly unusual decision to essentially sponsor its own program, using the commercial breaks to promote other shows on their network instead of selling those valuable time slots to outside advertisers. This situation was so dire that only one company, Ralston Purina, the pet food and cereal manufacturer, occasionally agreed to advertise during the Hathaways, and even then only on alternate weeks rather than committing to regular sponsorship. The fact that a major television network had to give up potential advertising revenue and use those commercial slots to promote itself reveals just how toxic the show had become to advertisers, who clearly saw no value in associating their brands with a program that audiences were actively avoiding in droves. Fact 3. Jack Weston nearly got bitten by a chimp. Working with animal actors can be unpredictable at the best of times, but for Jack Weston, who played Walter Hathaway on the show, the experience of acting alongside 3 chimpanzees turned genuinely dangerous during production. At some point while filming the series, one of the Marquise chimps came close to biting Weston in an incident that clearly left the actor shaken enough to fundamentally change how he approached his work on the show. The irony of this situation was particularly stark, given that Weston's character was supposed to be the adoptive father figure to these 3 chimps, treating them as his beloved children in every scene, which typically would require close physical interaction, warmth, and the kind of natural chemistry that comes from actors working in close proximity. However, after this near-bite incident, Weston made a very practical decision for his own safety and spent the remainder of the series deliberately keeping as much physical distance as possible between himself and his supposed chimp children, which must have created some awkward blocking choices for the directors and likely made certain scenes feel stilted or unnatural. The situation highlighted one of the fundamental problems with the show's entire concept. Asking human actors to behave as if dangerous wild animals were their family members was not only degrading, as critics pointed out, but also potentially hazardous to the performers who had to work in close quarters with unpredictable primates day after day. Fact 4. The show was created for chimps, not humans. Most television shows begin with writers creating compelling characters and storylines, then casting talented actors to bring those roles to life. But the Hathaways followed a completely backwards development process that prioritized animals over human performers from the very beginning. Executive producer Robert Sparks watched the Marquise chimps perform on The Jack Benny Show and became so captivated by their trained antics that he decided to build an entire television series around them, essentially putting the cart before the horse by designing a show specifically to showcase chimpanzees rather than developing a strong concept that happened to include animals. This meant that Peggy Cass and Jack Weston, both accomplished actors with significant theatrical credentials, were hired not as the central focus of the program, but essentially as supporting players whose primary job was to react to whatever the chimps did on camera. The entire premise of the show, a couple treating 3 performing chimpanzees as their adopted children, existed solely to create a framework that would justify putting the Marquise chimps on screen every week, with the human storylines and character development taking a clear backseat to whatever tricks and behaviors the trained primates could perform. This fundamental misunderstanding of what makes good television meant that the show never had a chance to develop the kind of genuine human relationships and emotional stakes that audiences connect with, because the producers viewed the human actors as little more than props to facilitate the real stars they cared about. Fact 5. Peggy Cass only did it for money. Actors typically speak enthusiastically about their projects in public, carefully maintaining the illusion that every role they take is a passion project they believe in wholeheartedly. But Peggy Cass was refreshingly honest about her motivations for joining the Hathaways cast. The accomplished actress, who had won a Tony Award and received an Oscar nomination for her role in Auntie Mame just a few years earlier, openly admitted that she accepted the job purely for financial reasons rather than any artistic interest in the material or belief that the concept had potential. Even more telling was her confession that she didn't think the pilot would sell to the network in the first place, which meant she probably viewed it as easy money for filming a pilot that would never see the light of day, making it a safe bet to collect a paycheck without the long-term commitment of actually starring in a series. Her lack of faith in the project proved prescient in one sense. The show was indeed terrible and quickly canceled, though unfortunately for Cass, the network did pick up the pilot, forcing her to spend an entire season working on a program she had never believed in from the start. During interviews while the show was on the air, Cass tried to put a positive spin on the experience, remarking that the chimps were natural comics and hard to top. But her initial candid admission about taking the job for money revealed the truth about how even the show's own star viewed this misguided project. Fact 6. Steve Allen's mother was in the cast. Hidden among the cast of this forgotten sitcom was a surprising connection to one of television's most influential pioneers, though few viewers at the time would have made the connection when watching the show. Belle Montrose, who played the recurring role of Mrs. Harrison, one of the Hathaway family's neighbors, was actually the real-life mother of Steve Allen, the legendary comedian, television host, and creator of The Tonight Show format that would define late-night television for generations to come. Montrose herself had an impressive entertainment background long before her son became famous, having worked as a vaudeville performer in the early 20th century as part of a comedy duo called Allen and Montrose, where she performed alongside her husband and Steve Allen's father. Milton Berle, who himself became known as Mr. Television, once described Montrose as the funniest woman in vaudeville during their time touring together in the 1920s, which shows she had genuine comedic talent that ran in the family. By the time she appeared on the Hathaways in 1961 and 1962, Montrose was in her mid-70s and taking small television roles, including appearing on her son's own variety show, The Steve Allen Show, just a few years earlier. The fact that the mother of one of television's most respected innovators ended up in what critics would call possibly the worst series ever to air on network TV adds an ironic footnote to both their careers. Fact 7. The Red Rose Tea commercial gave kids nightmares. Before the Marcus Chimps became the stars of their own ill-fated sitcom, they appeared in a series of television commercials in 1960 for Brook Bond Foods, the makers of Red Rose Tea, and one of these ads became so bizarrely memorable that it traumatized young viewers and achieved cult status despite being off the air for decades. The most popular and disturbing of these commercials featured the Chimps dressed in plaid suit coats, performing as a wild jazz band inside a fictional nightclub called the Savoy Ritz, playing instruments like drums, piano, bass fiddle, and trombone, while another pair of chimps danced frantically on the floor. The truly unsettling part came when the lead vocalist chimp began chanting and screaming in a high-pitched voice, creating sounds that were meant to be exciting but instead came across as genuinely frightening to children watching at home. One film collector who saw the commercial as a 4-year-old child later wrote that it gave him nightmares for months, and he spent over 30 years searching for a copy of this elusive ad just to see again what had terrified him so much as a young boy. The commercial became so memorable in certain areas, particularly Pittsburgh, that a local radio DJ played the audio track during his show in 1968, and the requests were so overwhelming that he and a record producer actually pressed 1,045 5 RPM records of the jingle, which quickly sold out despite coming from what was essentially just a tea advertisement. Fact 8. The Chimps were international superstars. While the Hathaways struggled to find an audience and limped through just 26 episodes before cancellation, the Marquis Chimps themselves were actually wildly successful performers who had built an impressive entertainment career long before and after their sitcom failure. The Chimps made approximately 30 appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show alone, which means they performed on one of television's most prestigious variety programs more times than their then own series even had episodes, revealing just how much more popular they were as guest performers than as sitcom stars. Beyond Ed Sullivan, the Chimps were regular guests on numerous other major television programs throughout the 1950s and 60s, including The Jack Benny Show, The Hollywood Palace, Here's Lucy, and the NBC Comedy Hour, making them genuinely recognizable celebrities in an era when animal acts were a staple of variety television. Their success extended far beyond American television as well, since they had originally started their career in British music halls and European nightclubs during the 1940s and early 50s before even coming to the United States. The Chimps also appeared in films, including a Disney movie called Toby Tyler and a Three Stooges film called Stop, Look, and Laugh, and they maintained a successful live performance career with regular cabaret shows in Las Vegas nightclubs that continued through the 1970s, long after the Hathaways had been forgotten, proving that the Chimps themselves were talented performers who simply deserved better material than the sitcom that briefly bore their name. Fact 9. Danny Kaye discovered them in London. The Marcus Chimps' journey to American stardom happened through one of those chance encounters that can change the trajectory of an entire career, and it came courtesy of one of Hollywood's biggest stars at the time. In 1950, the legendary entertainer Danny Kaye was performing at the London Palladium, one of England's most prestigious theaters, when he shared the bill with the Marquis Chimps, who were at that point a well-established act on the British music hall circuit, but completely unknown in the United States. Kaye was so impressed by what he saw during their performances together that he approached Gene Detroit, the Chimps' owner and trainer, and told him that the act would be hugely successful if they brought it across the Atlantic to American audiences. This endorsement from someone of Kaye's stature carried enormous weight in the entertainment industry, and Detroit took the advice seriously enough to relocate his entire operation to the United States, eventually setting up his base of operations in Las Vegas, where he would train the Chimps and book them for performances throughout the country. Kaye's instincts proved absolutely correct, as the Marquis Chimps became one of the most popular animal acts in American television during the 1950s and 60s, appearing on all the major variety shows and eventually landing their own sitcom. even if that particular venture didn't work out as planned, making Kay's casual suggestion at the London Palladium one of the most consequential moments in the chimp's long career. Fact 10. The trainer couldn't read until his teens. Jean Detroy, the man who trained the Marquis chimp and built them into one of the most successful animal acts in show business, came from incredibly humble beginnings that would have seemed to predict a very different life than the one he ultimately created for himself. Born as Samuel Wood in Stockport, England in 1909, Detroy grew up in a family of circus performers who lived a transient lifestyle, moving from town to town, and like many children in traveling entertainment families during that era, he left school at an extremely early age without receiving much formal education at all. For years, the young Detroy worked as a tightrope walker in English music halls and carnivals, performing under the stage name The Vagabond of the Wire, thrilling audiences with his dangerous high-wire act while carrying a secret that would have shocked most people who watched him perform with such confidence and skill. It wasn't until he reached his teenage years that Detroy finally taught himself to read and write, acquiring these basic literacy skills as an adolescent rather than as a young child like most people, which speaks to both the unconventional nature of his upbringing and his determination to educate himself despite the lack of formal schooling. This background in circus life, where he learned discipline, showmanship, and the importance of rigorous training, ultimately served him well when he decided to shift from performing himself to training animals, applying the same dedication and work ethic to teaching chimpanzees that had made him successful as an acrobat. Fact 11. 20 different chimps over 30 years. The Marquis chimps that audiences saw on television and in live performances weren't just 3 individual animals who stayed the same throughout the decades, but rather a rotating troupe that Jean Detroy carefully trained and replaced over the course of his remarkably long career as an animal trainer. After relocating to Las Vegas following his successful tour in the United States, Detroy established his base of operations in the entertainment capital of the world and spent approximately 30 years training around 20 different chimpanzees who would take on the Marquis name and perform his carefully choreographed routines. The chimps had to be replaced periodically because chimpanzees, like human performers, age and eventually retire from performing, and young chimps are much easier to train and control than older ones, which meant Detroy constantly had to bring in new animals and teach them the same tricks, behaviors, and stage routines that had made the act famous. When the chimps weren't making their television appearances on shows like Ed Sullivan or working on the Hathaways sitcom, they maintained a busy schedule performing live in Las Vegas nightclub cabaret shows, where they would entertain tourists and casino patrons with their roller skating, bicycle riding, and other trained behaviors that showcased Detroit's patient and skilled approach to animal training. This steady work in Las Vegas nightclubs provided financial stability and kept the act sharp between their higher-profile television bookings, and the live shows continued successfully through the 1970s, proving that the Marquis chimps had staying power in entertainment that far outlasted their brief and unsuccessful venture into situation comedy. Fact 12. The opening credits were animated. In a decision that made an already strange concept even more surreal, the Hathaways chose to open each episode not with live-action footage of its stars, but with an animated title sequence that featured cartoon versions of the chimps and the principal human actors. This choice was particularly unusual for a live-action sitcom in the early 1960s, when most shows simply used straightforward opening credits over scenes from the program or static photographs of the cast, making the animated approach stand out as both creative and oddly disconnected from the show's actual content. The animation style and production quality strongly suggest that the opening sequence came from Hanna-Barbera, the legendary animation studio that had revolutionized television animation with the Flintstones, which premiered just 1 year before the Hathaways in 1960. This connection made sense because both the Hathaways and early Hanna-Barbera productions were distributed and financed by Screen Gems, the television production subsidiary of Columbia Pictures, which meant the studio had easy access to Hanna-Barbera's animation capabilities and likely used them to create a more eye-catching opening than a simple live-action credits sequence would have provided. The irony of using animation from the studio that created one of television's most successful and beloved sitcoms to introduce what critics would later call possibly the worst series ever to air on network television adds yet another bizarre footnote to the Hathaways' troubled legacy. Fact 13. They had their own bedroom and wardrobe. The show's commitment to its bizarre premise of treating chimpanzees as human children extended far beyond just the dialogue and plot lines, manifesting in detailed production design choices that pushed the concept to its logical but unsettling extreme. The three chimps who starred in the series, Candy, Charlie, and Enoch, were given their own fully furnished bedroom on the Hathaway home set, complete with beds, toys, and all the typical decorations you would expect to find in any suburban child's room during the early 1960s. Even more elaborate was the extensive wardrobe that the production assembled for the chimps, with costume designers creating or purchasing a complete collection of children's clothing sized appropriately for chimpanzees. Allowing the animals to be dressed in different outfits for different scenes, just like human child actors would be. This level of commitment to the illusion meant that viewers watching at home saw chimps wearing pajamas for bedtime scenes, play clothes for outdoor sequences, and even formal outfits for special occasions, all Tissot, carefully selected and fitted to make the animals look as much like human children as possible. The production team essentially had to run a full wardrobe department for three chimpanzees who couldn't care less about fashion or comfort, creating a behind-the-scenes situation that must have been both expensive and logistically complicated, all in service of a concept that audiences found more disturbing than charming. Fact 14. The chimps lived on a Las Vegas ranch. When the cameras stopped rolling and the television appearances ended, the Marquis chimps returned to what was, by animal standards, an unusually comfortable and even luxurious living situation that reflected just how valuable they were as performing assets. Gene Detroit maintained a ranch in Las Vegas specifically for housing and training his troupe of performing chimpanzees, providing them with facilities and care that went well beyond what most working animals received during that era, though this investment made practical sense given how much income the chimps generated for him. The chimps were genuinely profitable performers at the height of their popularity, with reports suggesting they earned substantial sums that would be impressive even by human entertainer standards, allowing Detroit to reinvest in their living conditions and ensure they remained healthy and capable of performing. Between their television appearances, nightclub shows, commercial work, and the brief sitcom run, the Marquis chimps had multiple revenue streams that kept money flowing in consistently throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, making them among the most financially successful animal acts in show business history. The Las Vegas ranch served as both their home base and training facility, where new chimps could be brought in and taught the routines, while veteran performers could rest between engagements, creating a kind of entertainment factory dedicated entirely to producing and maintaining a single animal act that proved far more durable and popular than the Hathaway sitcom that briefly featured them. Fact 15. One episode featured chimp tonsillitis. The writers of the Hathaways fully committed to the show's absurd premise by creating storylines that treated the chimpanzees exactly as if they were human children dealing with typical childhood problems. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the 6th episode of the series titled Candy's Tonsils, which aired on November 10, 1961. The entire plot of this half-hour episode revolved around Candy, one of the three chimp children, coming down with tonsillitis and needing to take medicine, which became complicated when the chimp refused to cooperate with taking her prescribed treatment. The episode featured a veterinarian character named Dr. Dorsey, played by actor Vaughn Taylor, who presumably had to deliver his lines with a straight face while examining a chimpanzee as if it were a sick child in need of medical care. According to the episode synopsis, the resolution came when Charlie, another one of the chimps, figured out a clever solution by feeding Candy her medicine hidden inside a coconut, demonstrating that the show expected audiences to believe these chimpanzees not only got human illnesses, but could also problem solve and help each other like siblings would. This episode perfectly encapsulated everything critics found degrading about the show's premise, as it asked viewers to suspend disbelief to such an extreme degree that they would accept chimpanzees getting tonsillitis and receiving medical treatment just like human patients, pushing the boundaries of acceptable sitcom premises well past the breaking point.